Let me start with a confession. My bedtime routine is older than my slippers, and my slippers are not young. One of them is missing half the sole. The other looks like it fought a squirrel and lost. But every evening, without fail, I put them on. Because what's the point of pajamas if you don't pair them with slippers that sigh when you walk? I swear mine groan at me. Now, before I tell you how I came to this shocking discovery about my bedtime routine, let me ask you this. Do you have a routine? Of course you do. Everyone does. Brush teeth, check locks, argue with thermostat, pretend you don't check the fridge one last time. You do. Don't lie. By the way, if you enjoy cozy nonsense like this, you might as well subscribe and like. It tells me you're the kind of person who cares about worn-out slippers, and you're my kind of people. So, this evening started like any other. I shuffled into the kitchen. The kettle was already giving me attitude. That kettle has seen things. It whistles like a referee who's sick of players pretending not to hear. I leaned against the counter, waiting for the boil. Daisy, our dog, flopped on the floor. She doesn't move at night unless food falls. She's like a furry bouncer for crumbs. My wife walked past, carrying what looked suspiciously like another scented candle. We already have 37. She claims each one has a different mood. I claim they all smell like wax, but I keep that to myself because marriage is compromise, and also because she controls the thermostat. Anyway, tea in hand, slippers sighing. I started the long march toward bedtime, not long in distance, just long in ceremony. I sat on the edge of the bed, put my mug on the chipped nightstand, and looked down at my slippers. That's when it hit me. I've been doing this exact sequence for decades. Same order. Same muttering under my breath about the thermostat. Same shuffling of cards on the nightstand I never actually play with. And I realized this whole ritual was older than the slippers I've replaced 3 times. That bothered me. Because slippers are supposed to last, but routines, those sneak up on you. You think you're just brushing your teeth. Then suddenly you're reenacting the same bedtime play every night for 30 years. I decided to investigate. When did this routine begin? Was there a first night, a starting point, like the pilot episode of my bedtime sitcom? I leaned back on the pillow. It has a dent shaped exactly like my head. That's how long it's been mine. I squinted at the ceiling. The ceiling fan spun slowly like it was bored of listening to me. Then my wife appeared. She gave me one look. "You're thinking again," she said, which is never a good sign, apparently. "I'm just wondering if my slippers are younger than my routine," I told her. She didn't even blink. "That's the kind of thing you tell YouTube people, not your wife." And she walked away with her candle. So here we are, I'll tell you. Because you won't roll your eyes, at least not where I can see it. My earliest memory of the routine was in my first apartment. I was 20. The apartment had suspicious carpet stains and a fridge that moaned at night. I had one mug, one spoon, and a mattress that groaned louder than the fridge. And yet I still boiled water, still sipped tea, still shuffled toward bed like an old man in training. It hit me. My bedtime routine has outlived roommates, jobs, cars, and 3 different kettles. The slippers just cycle through like guest stars. I laughed to myself. Not a big laugh, just that dry little chuckle you give when you realize you've been outsmarted by your own life. Routine wins, slippers lose. Daisy perked up. She thinks any laugh means food. When she realized it didn't, she gave me a look that said, "Pointless human noise." And that's when I decided to test it. Could I break the routine? Could I go to bed differently? Skip a step? Brush teeth after tea instead of before? Wear socks instead of slippers? It felt rebellious, like streaking through a neighborhood watch meeting. I pulled off the slippers dramatically. They flopped on the floor like two tired fish. I walked barefoot across the room. The carpet was cold. Too cold. I panicked and dove back into the slippers. So much for rebellion. I tried again. This time, I left the tea unfinished. Half a mug sat there steaming. I slid under the blanket, triumphant. But then, the mug called to me. Not literally. I'm not that far gone. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Sitting there, unfinished, lonely. So I got up, sighed, and drank it. Routine restored. Meanwhile, outside, I heard Carl, my neighbor, fumbling with his trash cans. Carl always puts them out too early or too late, and he mutters about raccoons like they're part of a conspiracy. I peeked out the window. There he was, in his bathrobe, arguing with a recycling bin. I thought, well, at least my routine is harmless. Carl's out there declaring war on plastics. Back in bed, slippers on the rug, tea mug empty, I realized something. The routine isn't just habit. It's survival. It's the one thing that hasn't changed no matter what. Jobs, bills, neighbors who hold garage sales every weekend. Through all of it, bedtime routine stayed, even when my slippers gave up on me. And I'll admit, there's comfort in that, even if it makes you feel like you've been living in reruns. The clock ticked. Daisy snored. My wife hummed down the hall, probably organizing candles by seasonal mood. And I thought, maybe slippers age, maybe mugs chip, maybe carpets wear thin. But routine? That's timeless. Or at least as timeless as a man who can't sleep without checking the thermostat 4 times. Speaking of which, I got up, checked it. Still too cold. She'll never admit it, but I swear my wife sneaks in after me and sets it back. It's a silent war. Thermostat diplomacy. No peace treaty in sight. I slipped back into bed, slippers parked neatly. Routine fully executed. And for the first time, I thought, maybe that's not a problem. Maybe the whole point of bedtime is the routine. The slippers are just along for the ride. Of course, I'll still complain about them. That's part of it too. The next morning, I woke up with that same thought stuck in my head. Not about slippers, about routine, which I realize is an incredibly boring thing to admit. But when you reach my age, you take what you can get. I shuffled into the kitchen. The kettle groaned at me like an old coworker who's one email away from quitting. Daisy yawned so wide I thought her jaw would unhinge. Then she sighed, rolled onto her side, and went right back to sleep. It's impressive how little responsibility a dog feels. She contributes nothing to the mortgage, yet naps like a CEO. My wife was already gone, off to some yoga class where they stretch and breathe aggressively. She swears by it. Mindful breathing, she calls it. I call it paying money to exhale. But I keep that thought to myself, because marriage is compromise. That left me alone with my thoughts, always dangerous. I started tracing it back. When exactly did the bedtime ritual begin? Not the slippers. They come and go. The actual steps, tea, slippers, thermostat, lights, muttering about neighbors, bed. I sat there with my tea and thought, was it college? No, back then, I was lucky if I remembered to brush my teeth. Half the time I fell asleep with a burrito in my hand. Sometimes I woke up with a tortilla glued to my cheek. That wasn't routine. That was survival. So maybe after college, when I moved into that dingy first apartment, the one with suspicious carpet stains and a fridge that sounded like Darth Vader wheezing, I remembered nights there. The tiny kettle I bought from a second-hand store, the squeaky floorboards that gave away every step, the draft that came through the window no matter how much duct tape I used. I'd shuffle into bed with tea, muttering about the cold. It felt eerily familiar. The routine had already been born. That was the pilot episode. I chuckled into my mug. Imagine explaining this to anyone else. Oh yes, my life's great discovery is that I've been going to bed the same way for 30 years. Thrilling. Truly groundbreaking. Move over, scientists. Daisy thumped her tail once. She always agrees when food or naps are involved, and since this was about naps, she considered it relevant. By afternoon, I couldn't shake it. I brought it up with Carl. Carl is my neighbor, the one who thinks raccoons are running a covert operation in his trash cans. He was out front, wrestling with his recycling bin again. The bin was clearly winning. Carl, I said, leaning on the fence, do you ever notice your bedtime routine hasn't changed in decades? He froze, mid-wrestle. Gave me a look like I'd just accused him of joining the raccoon conspiracy. What routine? He said. You know, the order of things, tea, slippers, lights, bed. Carl snorted. My only routine is making sure the raccoons don't win. Bed happens when they give up. Then he went back to wrestling the bin. The raccoons were clearly winning too. Useless. I needed someone sane. So that night, I tried again with my wife. She was in the living room, lighting yet another candle. This one smelled like autumn forest, which, if you ask me, is just pine and cinnamon arguing. Honey, I said, when did you first notice your bedtime routine? She didn't look up. I noticed it the first night I married you. You muttered about the thermostat in your sleep. That's not what I meant. She finally looked at me. Henry, some people wonder about the universe. Some people wonder about the meaning of life. You wonder if your slippers are older than your habits. She blew out the match and walked away. Case closed, apparently. But it wasn't closed for me. If anything, it was open wider. Once your brain grabs onto something ridiculous, it won't let go. Like when you start humming a jingle and suddenly you're singing about laundry detergent in the shower. So I conducted an experiment. That night, I skipped tea. Bold, I know. I brushed my teeth, went straight to bed, and pulled the blanket up to my chin. I waited. My body revolted. My mouth was dry. My brain kept whispering, "Where's the tea?" You forgot the tea. I lasted 3 minutes before I stomped back to the kitchen. The kettle sighed. Routine restored. I scribbled in a notebook. Yes, I keep one on the nightstand. Don't laugh. It's full of important thoughts like, buy milk, and why does Daisy bark at the toaster? I wrote, Experiment 1. Failed. Tea mandatory. Next night I tried skipping slippers, went straight from kitchen to bed in socks. At first it felt fine. Then the socks got damp from Daisy's water bowl. I growled. I hate damp socks. They're proof that God has a sense of humor. I put the slippers back on. Experiment 2. Failed. On night 3, I went full radical. I brushed my teeth after tea. That way the bedtime order shifted. Tea, then teeth, then bed. Genius. Except I discovered that mint toothpaste and leftover tea don't mix. Tasted like hot spearmint dirt. I spat into the sink, shaking my head. Experiment 3. Failed. By the 4th night, I gave up. The routine was indestructible. It didn't care about experiments. It was older than my slippers, older than my stubbornness, older than Carl's raccoon battles. It was permanent. I slumped in bed that night, slippers on the rug, mug empty, Daisy snoring. My wife poked her head in. "Why are you smiling?" she asked. "Because I lost," I said. "To what?" "To the bedtime routine." She shook her head, muttered something about me needing a hobby, and disappeared with her candle. But lying there, I thought, maybe losing isn't bad. Maybe routine is a kind of win, a victory of comfort over chaos, a nightly promise that no matter how weird the day gets, the evening ends the same way. And you know what? That's not so bad. Even if my slippers look like they've been chewed by Daisy, even if Carl's raccoons win their midnight battles, even if my wife keeps importing candles like she's stocking up for the apocalypse. The ceiling fan spun above me. The thermostat clicked, and I realized this wasn't just my routine, it was my anchor. And maybe that's the point of slippers after all, not just to keep your feet warm, but to remind you where you stand. I sat there with the pile of slippers like some archaeologist who dug up a strange site. Not gold coins, not fossils, just worn-out footwear that smelled faintly of Earl Grey and dog biscuits. Daisy sniffed one pair and sneezed. I think she was making a point. Dogs don't need slippers. They just walk around barefoot and somehow survive winter. Meanwhile, I'm the guy with a rotation of slippers for different moods. Apparently, one pair for tea-drinking nights, another pair for serious reading, and a third for when the thermostat war is at its peak. My wife leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, candle glowing beside her. "You know," she said, "I think you've been clinging to that routine longer than you've clung to me." I raised an eyebrow. "Not true. You smell better than these slippers," she smirked. "Debatable." She walked off, humming to herself, leaving me to face my slipper history alone. And it hit me. She was right. Not about the smell, about the clinging. This routine of mine, tea, slippers, thermostat, bed, it had been around before her, before Daisy, before Carl yelling about raccoons at midnight. I sat back, thinking of that first apartment again. The one with the squeaky mattress and the neighbor who owned a parrot that cursed at me every time I walked by. That parrot is probably long gone. But the routine, still here. Older than Daisy. Older than my slippers. Older than the thermostat arguments. It was like bumping into an old friend. The kind of friend who doesn't call much, but shows up exactly the same every time. Predictable, comforting, maybe a little annoying, but still yours. I slid my feet into my current slippers, the tired ones, and shuffled into the kitchen. The kettle was waiting. It always waits. And as the water boiled, I realized I'd been having the same soundtrack for decades. Kettle hissing, floor creaking, tea pouring. A bedtime symphony. Played nightly. Never late. Never canceled. Daisy followed me, toenails tapping on the tile. She sat down, staring at me like she always does around tea time. It's not that she wants tea. She just knows a biscuit sometimes sneaks out during the process. Routines are contagious. She's trained herself to expect snacks whenever she hears the kettle. I poured the water, the steam fogging my glasses, and thought about how absurdly old this habit of mine was. I didn't even like tea when I first started. It was just what I could afford. Coffee seemed like an expensive luxury in college. Tea bags were cheap. So I made tea. Then I made tea again the next night. And again. And again. Until it became this thing. A ritual disguised as survival. Carl's voice drifted faintly through the wall. He was shouting at something again. I couldn't make out the words, but I assumed raccoons, or maybe his Wi-Fi router. Carl yells at a lot of things. I carried the tea back to bed and sat down carefully so Daisy wouldn't lose her spot at the foot. She gave me a look anyway. Dogs always act like you're trespassing on their territory. I set the mug down, pulled the blanket up, and stared at my slippers on the rug. Tired, frayed, but loyal. My wife came back in, holding her phone. "Guess what?" she said. "Linda just texted me. She's starting a new nighttime routine. Yoga, essential oils, journaling. She says it's life-changing," I groaned. "Of course Linda says that. She says everything is life-changing. Remember her air fryer? She wasn't wrong about that, my wife said, smiling. I had to admit she wasn't. Still, I wasn't about to let Linda's candle and yoga routine shame my old tea and slippers tradition. Mine had survived decades. Air fryers come and go. My bedtime routine endures. Daisy shifted, pressing her warm back against my leg. The lavender candle flickered. The kettle cooled in the kitchen. And I thought, maybe this was the proof I needed. Proof that some routines are like roots. They grow down deep and hold you steady, even when everything else changes. I sipped the tea. Same chipped mug. Same warmth in my hands. Same sigh escaping as the steam rose. And I couldn't help but laugh quietly. Because here I was, realizing my bedtime routine was older than every pair of slippers I owned. Older than Daisy. Older than this marriage, older than Carl's raccoon battles, older than Linda's obsessions, older than almost everything in this house. And yet, it still worked. It still carried me gently into the night, just as it had when I was 20, sitting cross-legged on that floor, sipping tea and listening to the fridge moan like an injured cow. The slippers might come and go, but the bedtime routine, that, apparently, was forever. I had the slippers lined up like tiny, fuzzy guards at the foot of the bed. The mug of tea was sitting there on the nightstand, steam curling upward like it knew it owned me. And suddenly, I thought, what if I just didn't? That was the spark, the dangerous, ridiculous spark. What if I didn't follow the routine tonight? What if I broke the cycle? Skipped a step, ignored the slippers, left the tea untouched? What if I threw the whole operation into chaos? Daisy lifted her head from her spot at the end of the bed. She blinked at me with that heavy, judgmental look only dogs and librarians can master. Then she flopped back down with a sigh. Clearly, she didn't believe for a second that I had the guts to actually break my pattern. But I leaned back against the pillows and said it out loud. Maybe tonight I don't drink the tea. The words sounded wild, like I'd just declared I was moving to Mars. My wife rolled over, squinting at me in the glow of her lavender candle. You're what? I'm rebelling, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Against who? The Teabag Union? Against tradition. She gave a sleepy smile. Henry, you've had the same bedtime routine since I met you. You can't break it. It's practically in your DNA. That's exactly why I need to, I said, to prove I'm not a slave to habit. Good luck with that, she murmured, turning back toward her pillow. I stared at the mug. It stared back. The steam curled higher, like it was taunting me. You'll cave, it seemed to whisper. You always cave. I shoved the mug aside dramatically. No tea tonight, I announced like some revolutionary leader. No applause. Daisy snored. My wife muttered something about idiot and sleep. But I held firm. For 5 minutes. Those 5 minutes were brutal. My throat got dry. My mind wouldn't shut off. I lay there thinking about the kettle in the kitchen. Was it still warm? Was it lonely without me? And why did the blanket suddenly feel itchy? Was it always this itchy? I rolled over, then back, then kicked one leg out for balance. Nothing worked. Without tea, the whole operation fell apart. My brain felt like it had left the stage, and the understudy didn't know the lines. My wife groaned. Henry, please, drink the tea. I'm proving a point, I said. What point? That I don't need it. You do, she said flatly. That's not a point. That's biology. I closed my eyes and tried to meditate. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in. Did I lock the back door? Breathe out. Did I leave the kettle on? Breathe in. Would Carl somehow notice if I skipped a night? I imagined him storming into the bedroom with his flashlight. Henry! You broke the chain. The raccoons can sense weakness. I sat up, sweating. Daisy startled awake and gave me the side eye. Even she seemed embarrassed for me. Finally, I whispered, "Fine. I'll drink it." I slipped my feet into the slippers. They felt smug, like they knew they were back in charge. I padded down the hallway, each floorboard creak louder than the last. It was like the house was tattling. Routine is being restored. Henry's back in line. The kettle sat on the counter like a smug general. I filled it, flicked the switch, and waited. The hiss rose, steam curled, and instantly my shoulders loosened, like the machine was scolding me, but also forgiving me. "You'll never quit me," it seemed to say, and I knew it was right. I carried the mug carefully back to the bedroom. My wife peeked one eye open and smirked. "Told you." "This isn't giving in," I said defensively. "It's balance." "Sure," she said, turning back over. "Balance." I sipped. The warmth spread down my throat. The steam fogged my glasses. The blanket stopped itching. Order was restored, and that's when Carl shouted from his yard. "Not tonight, you bandits! The cans are locked! Go home!" I groaned, dragging myself to the window. Sure enough, there he was in his plaid bathrobe, flashlight waving like a lightsaber. I cracked the window. "Carl, it's midnight." "They're regrouping," he hissed. "You should reinforce your bins, Henry. They're smarter than they look." I closed the window. Let him fight his furry war. I had slippers and tea to manage. Back in bed, Daisy had sprawled across my half of the blanket. She yawned dramatically as I tried to squeeze back in. I nudged her gently until she shifted with an annoyed grunt. She didn't respect my rebellion either. I drained the mug, set it back on the nightstand, and pulled the blanket up. The house settled around me. My wife's breathing went soft and steady. The candle flickered faintly. Daisy twitched in her dreams. Even Carl went quiet. I sighed. The rebellion had failed. Routine had won again. And I was oddly relieved, because maybe that was the point all along. Not freedom, not change, but comfort. The kind of comfort that carries you to sleep night after night, older than any pair of slippers could ever hope to be. I carried my slippers into the living room like they were rare antiques. They flopped in my hands. Not impressive to anyone else, but to me, they were a measuring stick. A reminder. My routine was older than they were. The kettle hissed in the kitchen. Steam rose like an old friend waving. Daisy stretched across the couch with a grunt. My wife turned a page in her magazine without looking at me. She has perfected that move. "These slippers," I said. I held them up like a man presenting evidence. "They're newer than my bedtime ritual." She didn't glance up. Her voice was flat. "That's because your bedtime ritual hasn't changed since Reagan was in office." I squinted at her. Hard to tell if she meant that as praise or criticism. With her, it could be either. I slid the slippers on, shuffled across the floor, dropped into my chair with the kind of groan that belongs in a museum. Daisy sighed, as if she too was tired of the drama. I reached for my chipped mug. The logo on the side is faded now. A baseball team that hasn't won anything in decades. Still my favorite mug. I sipped. Too hot. Burned my lip, like always. Another part of the tradition. I never learn. My eyes drifted to the window. Carl was out there, banging around with his garbage cans. He always does this at night. The entire neighborhood is forced to share the soundtrack. "Carl again," I muttered. My wife's voice floated over the top of her magazine. Maybe making noise is his bedtime routine. I frowned. She might be right. I prefer mine quieter. That's the thing about bedtime habits. They sneak up on you. At first it's just a cup of tea, then it's tea, then brushing your teeth, then arranging pillows. One day you blink, and suddenly you've been doing the same steps for 30 years. I thought about that as I watched steam rise from the mug. I thought about lava lamps. I thought about vibrating mattress pads. I thought about the time Hawaiian shirt man tried to convince the whole block to get tiki torches for ambiance. None of those lasted, but my bedtime routine stayed. The kettle clicked again in the kitchen. It always does that after cooling down, like a reminder, as if it's saying, "Don't forget you're getting old, but I'm still here." I got up, flicked the lamp twice, always twice. My wife insists once is fine. I tell her twice keeps bad luck away. She says that's superstition. I call it insurance. Daisy followed me down the hall. Her nails clicked like castanets. She knows the choreography: bathroom, mirror, toothbrush, rinse, spit, pat towel, lights off, shuffle to bed. It's the same sequence I've done since I was a teenager. Back then, it was acne cream and late-night radio. Now, it's wrinkles and a snoring dog. But the rhythm hasn't changed. I passed the hall closet. Inside was a jumble of shoes, sneakers, boots, slippers from years ago, all worn thin, all retired, none of them remembered, but the routine still marched on. I slid into bed, sheets cool, pillows stacked. Daisy curled near my feet. She fits right into the system. Through the blinds, I saw Hawaiian shirt man's backyard light flicker on. He was stringing up more bulbs. Festive. Too festive for a Tuesday. His shirt glowed like a warning sign. I shook my head. "Don't even think about it," I whispered to Daisy. We weren't joining. My wife's voice came from the dark. "If he invites you over, tell him you've already got a ritual." I smiled. She's right. My bedtime routine is the one thing I've been loyal to longer than my car, my phone, even some of my furniture. It's predictable. Maybe embarrassingly so, but predictability can be comforting. I tapped the lamp again. Twice, for good measure. My wife sighed. She always sighs at that part. "You realize," she said, "your bedtime routine has outlived 2 houses, 3 cars, and every single one of your diets." I smiled into the dark. That's the beauty of it. The house grew still, the kind of stillness you only get before sleep, but I was wide awake, thinking about how the small things outlast the big things. I remembered the waterbed craze. Everyone swore it was the future. We tried one. Nearly drowned when Linda rolled over. That bed is long gone, but brushing my teeth, sipping tea, and tapping the lamp twice, still here. I thought of my first cell phone, the size of a shoe, dead within 5 years. But my ritual kept humming along, battery never failing. I remembered the diets, cabbage soup, Atkins, that brief kale smoothie phase that ended when Daisy barked at the blender until I gave up, all abandoned. But the bedtime ritual stayed. Daisy shifted, pressing her paws into my feet, warmth spreading, a reminder that even dogs learn the rhythm. She doesn't argue, she doesn't sigh, she just follows. I turned onto my side. My slippers sat neatly by the bed, still fairly new, but not as new as they felt earlier. Next to my ritual, they looked temporary, replaceable. The blinds rattled, a breeze sneaked in. I could smell someone's barbecue 2 houses down, maybe Carl, maybe Hawaiian shirt man. Some people chase novelty even at night. I chase the same old comfort. I thought of my father. He had his own routine, different from mine, but steady. Pipe by the chair, newspaper folded a certain way, a little cough before bed, all signals that life was winding down. I guess I learned from him. Not the pipe, not the newspaper, but the steadiness. The lamp buzzed faintly. I gave it another tap. 3rd time tonight. Insurance on top of insurance. My wife groaned. "If you tap that lamp again, Henry, I'm going to start a new ritual of my own." "What's that?" I asked, throwing the lamp out the window. I chuckled. Rituals evolve, apparently. The house finally settled. Even Carl's garbage cans stopped clanging. The neighborhood held its breath, and in that stillness, my slippers waited by the bed. New, yes, but already part of something ancient. I closed my eyes. Sleep crept closer, and my last thought was simple. Slippers wear out, but rituals endure. Maybe that's why they matter. Now, I'd just finished arranging the mugs when I noticed something odd out the front window. A little movement, a flicker of color, almost like bunting flapping in the wind. I squinted, pushed my glasses up my nose, and, well, would you believe it? Carl was setting up what looked suspiciously like a folding table right at the edge of his lawn, and not just any table. Oh no, this was his so-called entertainment station, which usually meant one thing: trouble. Carl has a way of turning the simplest event into a neighborhood spectacle. One time he decided to demonstrate his new hedge trimmer. 8 neighbors gathered, snacks were passed around, and somehow there was a raffle involved. For a hedge trimmer. Nobody asked for this. So the sight of his folding table immediately set off alarm bells in my head. "Linda," I called toward the kitchen, "brace yourself. Carl's bringing out the big table." From the kitchen, I heard her groan. "Tell me he's not setting up a microphone again." I leaned closer to the window. "Not yet. But I do see an extension cord, which is a bad sign." Sure enough, within minutes, Carl had not only set up the table, but also erected one of those collapsible tents, the kind you usually see at farmers markets. And then came the pièce de résistance, a hand-lettered sign dangling precariously from 2 bits of string. I read it aloud. "The first annual neighborhood tea parade." Linda poked her head in, flour on her cheek from whatever she was kneading. Tea parade? What in the world is a tea parade? I could only shrug. Either a march of kettles or a conga line of tea bags. Hard to say with Carl now. You'd think people would ignore this nonsense. But no, this neighborhood is full of people who secretly love a bit of drama. Like moths to a porch light, they began to emerge. Hawaiian shirt man, naturally, wearing a shirt so blinding it could have been used for traffic control. Then Doris from number 12, clutching her knitting bag. Even Daisy the dog trotted over, nose twitching at the promise of biscuits. Before long, a crowd had formed. Carl, delighted, announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to History in the Making. He always talks like a carnival barker when he's excited. Today we celebrate the noble beverage that has fueled gossip, diplomacy, and late-night cramming sessions alike: tea." Now, I'll admit, part of me was intrigued. Another part of me just wanted to drink my cup in peace. But then Linda nudged me with that look. You know the one. The "don't just stand there, go join in before Carl ropes the entire street into synchronized kettle whistling" look. So, mug in hand, I shuffled out to investigate. "Henry," Carl boomed the moment he spotted me. "Perfect timing. You, my friend, will lead the opening ceremony." Opening ceremony? "Carl, this is Tuesday. I didn't even brush my hair for this." He waved me off. "Nonsense. You're the wisest tea drinker we have. Everyone knows about your chipped mug and kettle routine. Legendary stuff." Suddenly 20 pairs of eyes were on me. Even Daisy looked expectant. I cleared my throat, held up my mug, and muttered, "Well, tea's hot. Don't spill it." There was a pause, then applause. Actual applause. I'd apparently just delivered the keynote speech. Carl beamed like a proud uncle. "Brilliant, wise and succinct. The man speaks truth." Next came the so-called parade. Carl had organized a line of neighbors, each holding some kind of tea-related item. Doris waved a doily. Hawaiian shirt man carried a kettle that looked more decorative than functional. Someone else had a tray of lemon wedges. They began marching slowly down the sidewalk, humming a tune that sounded suspiciously like "When the Saints Go Marching In," but with the words changed to "When the tea bags dunk again." I tried not to laugh, but it was impossible. Even Linda, usually immune to Carl's antics, was chuckling from our porch. And then Carl, because he never knows when to quit, introduced the tea tasting contest. He unveiled 6 thermoses, each filled with a different mystery brew. The challenge: guess the flavor. I was roped in immediately. The first sip: mint, easy. The second: something floral, maybe chamomile. But the third was an abomination. It tasted like someone had steeped a sock in hot water. I gagged, coughed, and spluttered. "What on earth is this?" Carl slapped his knee. "Special blend. Rooibos with prune juice." The crowd roared with laughter, except me. I was too busy wondering if prune rooibos qualified as cruel and unusual punishment. By the 4th thermos, my taste buds were staging a rebellion. 1 sip in, I muttered, "That's it, Carl. I surrender." "Give me plain old English breakfast any day," Carl winked. "Ah, but you're forgetting the spirit of experimentation," I whispered to Linda. "If experimentation means prune tea, I'd rather remain ignorant." The parade concluded mercifully with a group toast. Everyone clinked mugs, thermoses, and in one case, a Tupperware cup. Carl declared it an annual tradition, though I suspect next week he'll move on to something else, like the Great Neighborhood Biscuit Balance or synchronized lawn chair folding. As the crowd dispersed, Linda and I retreated inside. I collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. "You know," I said, "all I wanted was a quiet cup of tea." Linda handed me a scone. "And instead, you got a parade." I took a bite, sighed, and admitted, "Well, at least it wasn't a prune scone." She grinned. "Give Carl time." And that, my friend, was the day our street hosted its very first tea parade. A ridiculous, hilarious interruption to my evening ritual, but I'll admit, the laughter did taste almost as good as the tea itself. Almost. The thing about slippers is that they know you, not just your feet. They know your whole personality. They remember how you shuffle when you're tired, how you stomp when you're grumpy, how you tiptoe when you're sneaking the last cookie from the jar. Mine were starting to sag in the middle. The heel was worn thin, and there was a mysterious stain near the toe that looked suspiciously like chili. I denied it, of course. Whenever my wife pointed at it, I said, "That's character, not chili." She wasn't buying it. She never does. I set them down by the bed with the kind of ceremony usually reserved for sacred relics. And Daisy, the dog, immediately wandered over and gave them a sniff. Then another. Then a judgmental snort, as if to say, "Really? You've been parading these things around the house like they're crown jewels and they smell like feet and regret. Don't give me that look," I muttered. She yawned in reply, the kind of yawn that says, "You're boring me, old man. Dogs are brutally honest." I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about all the strange neighbors who seemed to have louder, flashier nighttime routines. Carl with his garbage can symphony, Hawaiian shirt man with his backyard light show, as though every Tuesday required a festival of questionable taste. Linda from 2 houses down, who insists on watering her garden at 9:30 at night with one of those hoses that hisses like an angry cobra. It's as if the whole neighborhood conspired to make my bedtime routine look boring. But boring has its advantages. Boring gets you into bed at the same time every night. Boring means you actually sleep. Meanwhile, Hawaiian shirt man will still be stringing lights at midnight, and Linda will still be negotiating with her roses under the moon. I leaned back, stacked my pillows, and reached for my chipped mug again. Still warm, still comforting. That mug has been through more than most of my appliances. The logo is so faded that guests have asked me if it's a piece of abstract art. No, I tell them proudly. It used to be a baseball team. They just haven't won anything in, well, decades. But they were mine. It's funny, isn't it? A mug outlasting championships, coaches, and entire eras. And here it is, still by my side at bedtime. I took another sip, ignored the inevitable lip burn, and thought about how every small thing, slippers, mugs, dogs, routines, adds up to a kind of invisible scaffolding that holds a life together. It doesn't get awards. It doesn't make headlines, but it keeps you standing. My wife stirred on her side of the bed. I could see the faint outline of her face in the glow from Hawaiian shirt man's ridiculous string lights. She turned just enough to catch me staring at my slippers like they were holy relics. "You realize," she murmured, "most people don't think about footwear this much." I smiled. "Most people," I whispered back, "don't know what they're missing." She rolled her eyes so hard, I swear the mattress shifted. Then she turned over again, pulling the blanket with her like a territorial cat. I tugged my half back. "We've been playing this blanket tug of war for 30 years. Neither of us has ever truly won. But that's part of the routine, too." Outside, I heard Carl drop another garbage can lid. It hit the driveway with a metallic clang that probably woke up 3 different counties. I imagined him standing there, proud of the echo, thinking, "That'll show them. That's how a real man takes out the trash." Daisy growled softly at the noise, then immediately fell back asleep, paws twitching as if she were chasing squirrels in a dream. I envied her. Dogs don't question their routines. They just do them. Stretch, eat, patrol the yard, nap, repeat, no angst, no overthinking. Meanwhile, humans lie awake at night wondering if they should have taken a different job in 1997. I reached over and tapped my lamp twice. Click, click, insurance. My wife groaned in the dark. "You're ridiculous," she mumbled, and then softer. "But predictable." I took that as a compliment, because that's what I wanted to be. Predictable, dependable. The kind of man whose dog knows exactly where he'll drop his slippers, whose wife knows exactly when he'll grumble about Carl, whose neighbors can set their clocks by the sound of his kettle. It's not glamorous, but glamour burns out. Rituals endure. I lay back, pulled the blanket higher, and listened to the house settle. The pipes sighed, the refrigerator hummed, the clock ticked, each sound familiar, each sound part of the lullaby of my home. Hawaiian shirt man's backyard light finally flicked off. Blessed darkness. For a moment, I thought I heard him humming a tune, something island-themed and vaguely out of tune. But then silence swallowed it. Peace returned. I smiled into the pillow. Some people search the world for peace. Me? I just put on my slippers, tapped my lamp, and drank from a chipped mug. Sleep began to tug at me. The kind of heavy, honest sleep that comes after a long day of ordinary things. And just before I drifted off, I had a final thought. Maybe that's what real comfort is. Not the new mattress Carl brags about, not the neon lights Hawaiian shirt man insists on, not even the high-tech coffee maker Linda swears changed her life. Number. Real comfort is slippers that fit, a dog at your feet, a wife sighing in the dark, and a routine that's lasted longer than half the furniture in your house. That's the secret. Not flashy, not noisy, just steady, and steady in the end might be the best bedtime story of all. There's a moment every night, right after I'm supposed to be asleep, when my brain decides it's time to negotiate. It waits until the house is dark, until Daisy is curled into her snoring donut shape at my feet, until my wife has claimed 70% of the blanket like she's filing a land deed. That's when my brain pipes up. "Excuse me," it whispers. "Important question. Did you remember to lock the front door?" I groaned into the pillow. "Of course I did," I muttered out loud, but the whisper didn't leave. It leaned in closer. "Are you sure? Absolutely sure? Because you know Carl leaves his garbage cans out front. That could be a cover for raccoons, or burglars, or burglar raccoons." I sat up halfway, glaring at the ceiling. My wife stirred. "Don't you dare," she mumbled without opening her eyes. "Don't I dare what?" I whispered back. "Don't you dare go check the lock again." "You do this every night. It's protocol," I said. "It's paranoia," she replied, rolling over, but the whisper had already won. I slid out of bed, slippers on, hallway light off. The floor creaked like it was tattling on me. Daisy raised her head, sighed, and flopped back down. Her paws twitched like she was thinking, "Amateur. The raccoons already know the door's locked." Down the hall I went, muttering about insurance, just like with the lamp. I twisted the knob. Solid, firm, secure, locked. Of course it was. It always is. Back to bed I went, slippers shuffling like they were scolding me. "See," they seemed to say, "you wasted a perfectly good warm pillow indentation for this." I slid under the covers, cold now, and tried to reclaim my share of the blanket. My wife made a sound that was somewhere between a groan and a growl. "You're a menace," she said. "But a secure menace," I whispered. Silence. For 2 blessed minutes. And then, another thought. "What if you left the kettle on?" I groaned. "No," I heard it click off. But what if it didn't click? What if tonight is the night it rebels, boils itself into a frenzy, and floods the kitchen? I was about to argue when Daisy's tail thumped once against the footboard, as if to say, "Don't you dare, I'm sleeping." So I stayed put. I took a deep breath, closed my eyes, and repeated my mantra: predictable is peaceful. Predictable is peaceful. And then, crash. I bolted upright. Daisy barked. My wife sat up, hair sticking out like a startled dandelion. "Carl," she muttered, already collapsing back into her pillow. And sure enough, through the window I could see him, bathed in the glow of his driveway light, wrestling with another garbage can lid like it had personally insulted his family. I watched him for a minute. The man has energy. The kind of energy I only remember from my 20s, when I thought midnight was a good time to reorganize the pantry. Daisy huffed once, satisfied it wasn't an intruder, and curled back up. My wife was already snoring again. And me. I sat there in the dark, slippers still on, wide awake. This is the curse of a routine man. One disruption and the whole system wobbles. It's like pulling one brick from a Jenga tower. You spend the rest of the night waiting for everything to collapse. I lay back down, stared at the ceiling, and tried to relax. But then my mind decided to wander, first to the slippers. How long would they last before the heel gave out completely? Should I start breaking in a new pair? Would a new pair feel like betrayal? Then, to Daisy. What if she outgrew her spot at the foot of the bed? Would I have to give her a pillow? Would she demand her own blanket? Would she eventually steal the whole bed like my wife does with the comforter? And finally, to the neighbors. What if Hawaiian Shirt Man decided to throw a surprise midnight luau? Would Carl volunteer to provide percussion with his garbage cans? Would Linda bring moonlit lemonade? Would anyone notice if I pretended to be asleep through the whole thing? The picture was so absurd, I actually chuckled out loud. My wife stirred again. "What now?" she asked. "Nothing," I said quickly. She didn't buy it. "You're imagining the neighbors again, aren't you?" I froze. How did you... Because you always laugh right before you tell me Hawaiian Shirt Man has ruined another Tuesday. I smiled into the dark. She knows me too well. That's the problem with being predictable. You're an open book, a bedtime story read too many times. I rolled over, trying to quiet my thoughts. But then the wind outside picked up. The gutters rattled. The porch flag flapped like it was arguing with the breeze. Another mental note appeared. What if the gutters clog tonight? What if rain starts and the water has nowhere to go? Stop, I whispered into my pillow. I wasn't sure if I was talking to the wind, my brain, or Carl's garbage lids. Daisy let out a small snore that sounded like a chuckle. Even the dog was mocking me. I shut my eyes tighter. I imagined the rhythm of my routine. Slippers by the bed, lamp tapped twice, mug set on the nightstand, pillows stacked just so. Each piece in place. That image steadied me. Like building a fort out of predictability. No raccoon burglars, no boiling kettles, no midnight luau's. Finally, after another long sigh, I felt sleep creeping back. The good kind. The heavy, quiet kind. But right before I drifted off, Daisy shifted, stretched out her legs, and planted one paw firmly against my ankle. A reminder. A dog's way of saying, stay put. Don't you dare check the door again. And I thought, maybe that's the real reason routines work. Not because they're logical, not because they're efficient, but because they keep you in place long enough to realize you're already safe, already home, already exactly where you need to be. I exhaled. The house exhaled with me. And this time, the silence lasted. Evening had settled. The house was quiet. Too quiet, in fact. The slippers lay by the chair, one tilted to the side, the other leaned against it. They looked like two tired friends waiting for a bus. I sat down and stared at them. Funny little things, flat at the heel, sagging at the toes, older than most of the gadgets in this house, older, maybe, than my patience. The wife walked by. She muttered without pausing. Move those. Someone will trip. I didn't. The slippers looked busy, important even. They were having a council, a late-night parliament of fabric and foam. The kettle joined in next, a click, then another, not boiling, not whistling, just reminding me it was still alive. I shuffled to the kitchen. The slippers dragged softly on the floor. I patted the kettle with one finger. Yes, yes, you've worked enough. Daisy followed me. Her nails clicked on the tiles. She sighed so loudly it echoed. She thinks I talk to appliances too much. She might be right. I poured the last of the hot water, a faint gurgle. A lonely tea bag plopped into the mug. Chamomile. It smelled like linen cupboards and honey. The kind of smell that makes you breathe slower. Back in the chair, mug in hand, steam curling up like a ghost, the slippers sprawled under the table. Daisy flopped beside them. Together, they looked like allies, dog and slippers, quiet, patient, faithful. I remembered my grandmother. She always said, "A slipper tells the truth about a man." I never asked what she meant, but staring at mine, I thought I understood. They sagged with my habits, bent with my pacing. They carried the marks of mornings, evenings, seasons. The truth was written right there, in flattened foam. The street outside had gone still. No Hawaiian Shirt Man with his loud radio. No Carl with his torchlight, hunting for fallen screws. Even Linda across the road had gone silent, curtains drawn, lights low. The neighborhood had tucked itself in. And yet, I stayed awake. Not restless, just alert. As if the quiet itself asked me to notice it. I sipped the tea. The steam tickled my nose. The slippers hugged my feet. Soft, familiar. Older than half the things I depend on. They had been with me everywhere, on the porch in winter, in the garden on wet mornings, once in the supermarket car park when I forgot I was wearing them. I'd walked 3 aisles before I noticed. The cashier noticed too. The slippers had seen birthdays, lazy Sundays, storms that rattled the roof like marbles, and nights like this, nights where nothing happened. But somehow everything did. Daisy shifted and put one paw on my slipper, a queen claiming her throne. I smiled. The memory came back sharp. The first night Daisy arrived, tiny, ears too big. She tripped right over my slipper and rolled like a pebble. Now here she was, grown and regal, still ruling the slippers. Other memories joined in. The ladder incident. Hawaiian shirt man borrowed it. He returned it covered in mud. I stomped around the kitchen in these slippers, muttering. For days I muttered. The wife finally said, "It's a ladder, not the Mona Lisa." I stopped muttering. But the slippers remembered. Or the winter morning Carl knocked on the door. Wanted to tell me about a new kind of mulch. I stood there in my slippers, cold air swirling, nodding as he lectured. The slippers squeaked on the frosty porch. I thought my toes might never thaw. The slippers had been chewed too. Daisy, back in her puppy days. She had gnawed one edge until it looked like a crescent moon. I never fixed it. Now it sits like a scar, a little history patch, proof that life left its bite marks. And there was the paint blotch. The time I tried to fix the shed door. I leaned down too far, splattered white paint all over the left toe, never washed out. I tell myself it looks artistic. Nobody else agrees. These slippers had heard everything. My grumbles, my mutterings, my half-finished jokes, the kind Daisy sneezed at instead of laughing. They'd heard silence too. The heavy kind, when nothing needs to be said. Once, I even used them as a weapon. Not dramatic, just a slipper swat at a fly that wouldn't leave. I missed. The fly lived, but the memory stayed. The tea was gone, the mug empty. My hands still warm from holding it. The chair had shaped itself to me, and the slippers had shaped themselves to my feet. I wiggled my toes. The fabric moved with me. Soft, worn, forgiving. Maybe that was what grandmother meant. Slippers tell the truth by how they hold you, by how they keep you steady, by how they forgive you for stepping too hard, too often. I leaned back and closed my eyes. The house hummed faintly. The fridge clicked, the heater sighed, the slippers stayed, unmoving, reliable. If you added up all the hours I'd spent in them, I might have crossed the country, not in distance, but in small, worn steps, kitchen to chair, chair to hall, hall to bed, back again. Journeys don't need miles to matter. Sometimes they only need slippers. The night deepened. The kettle stopped clicking. The dog stopped sighing. The wife had long since gone to bed. It was only me, and the slippers, and the quiet. I whispered to them, silly as it sounds, "Thank you." They stayed. Daisy stayed. The silence stayed. And the night folded around us like an old quilt, soft, familiar, older than my slippers. The evening stretched on. The neighbors had gone home. The plates from the Great Stew Adventure sat stacked by the sink. The house hummed with quiet. At last. I leaned back in my chair. The lamp in the corner flickered softly. The clock ticked. Tick, tock, a rhythm steady enough to hypnotize. Daisy curled at my feet. Her tail twitched once, then stilled. She was already deep in dreamland. Lucky dog. I envied her easy way of slipping into sleep. Linda wandered into the living room. She held a blanket, draped neatly over her shoulders. "Well," she said, her voice calm now, "that was a night." I nodded. "No one died," I whispered. She laughed quietly. "That's your measure of success?" I shrugged. "Seems fair." The air smelled faintly of stew, a mix of onion, broth, and whatever else found its way into the pot. It wasn't unpleasant. It was just lingering, like a guest who had stayed too long. Linda opened a window. Cool air drifted in. The curtains lifted like slow breaths. The stew smell thinned. Peace returned molecule by molecule. I poured myself a small cup of tea, the last of the day's supply. Steam rose, curling lazily toward the ceiling. I took a sip. The warmth spread through me. Every nerve seemed to sigh in relief. Across the street, the Hawaiian shirt man's porch light flicked on. He stepped outside, phone pressed to his ear. Even from here, I could see the shirt. Tonight it was neon green. A bold choice, always bold. He waved when he noticed me at the window. I raised my mug. He grinned and gave a thumbs up. The man thrived on chaos. Maybe he had enjoyed the stew too much, or maybe he was just happy for the entertainment. I closed the curtains. Enough neon for one night. Linda settled into her chair with a book. The cover was bright blue. The title had something about gardens in it. She flipped a page. Her eyes moved slowly, soaking in every word. I loved the way she read. Completely still, except for the faint twitch of a smile when she liked a sentence. The quiet grew deeper. The tick of the clock softened, as if it too was getting tired. Even Daisy's breathing slowed, turning into long, steady sighs, the kind of sound that makes you yawn without meaning to. I thought about the stew pot in the sink, the ladle still inside it, leaning like a tired soldier. I should wash it. But then again, it could wait. The pot wasn't going anywhere. I shifted in my chair, pulling a blanket over my knees. My eyes wandered to the shelves. Books lined them, some leaning, some stacked sideways. Each one carried a memory. Trips, birthdays, random afternoons spent in second-hand shops. Linda caught me staring at the shelves. She smiled without looking up from her book. "You're thinking again," I chuckled. "I try not to make a habit of it." She shook her head gently. Her page turned. The tea cooled in my hands. I drank the last sip. The mug clinked softly as I set it on the side table. A sound so small, yet so final. It marked the end of the evening. A draft brushed across my feet. I tucked the blanket tighter. The house felt older at night. The wood creaked more. The pipes muttered faintly. It was as if the whole structure exhaled after a long day. I looked again at Daisy. Her paws twitched in some dog dream chase. Maybe she was running across fields, or maybe she was stealing sausages from an invisible picnic. Her lips curled in a tiny dog smile. I hoped it was sausages. Linda yawned. She closed her book and placed it gently on the armrest. Her eyes met mine. "Bed?" she asked. "In a minute," I said. She nodded, knowing my ritual. I always lingered, always gave the night a chance to settle fully. The lamp buzzed faintly. Its glow was warm, but tired. I imagined it wanted rest, too. I reached out and switched it off. Darkness filled the room, soft, heavy, comfortable. The only light came from the window. Moonlight spilled across the rug. It looked like a pale river cutting through the floor. Quiet, slow, eternal. I listened. No cars, no neighbors, no clatter of pots or spoons, just the gentle sigh of wind against the house. The world outside seemed paused, like it was waiting for permission to move again, but I gave it none. I wanted stillness. For once, stillness stayed. Linda's footsteps padded softly down the hall. A door clicked open. A hinge groaned. The bed called her. It would call me too soon. I stayed where I was. The chair held me as though it had grown around me. I let my head rest back. My eyes slipped closed, not fully asleep, not fully awake, just hovering in that in-between place. Thoughts drifted in like clouds. The stew, the neighbors, the Hawaiian shirt man, Daisy's dreams, all of it blurred together. Funny, messy, perfect in its own lopsided way. I smiled in the dark. Nights like this had a strange comfort, chaotic in parts, but somehow ending in peace, always in peace. Linda's voice floated softly from the bedroom. "Don't fall asleep in the chair again." I grinned, eyes still closed. "I'll be there," I whispered, "eventually." For now I let the night hold me. The house breathed around me, the blanket warmed me. The silence grew thick like a cushion, and slowly, gently, I drifted further inward. The world outside could wait. The dishes could wait. Even tomorrow could wait. All that mattered was this moment, this stillness, this warm cocoon of night. The chair creaked as I shifted one last time. Daisy snored. Linda turned a page in her book, even though she had closed it. A habit, maybe, or a dream already beginning. I exhaled long and deep. The sound echoed in my chest, the kind of breath that empties you of the day, that makes space for rest. And with that, the story faded. The night wrapped itself tight around the house, and sleep at last arrived. And so the night grew quiet. The house rested. The stew was only a memory, and the laughter of neighbors faded into dreams. If you enjoyed drifting along with me tonight, let this story stay with you as you fall asleep. You don't have to do anything at all. Just know there will be another tale waiting for you the next time you tuck yourself in. Good night. Sleep well. And I'll see you here again for another story.